The late afternoon chill clung to my bones as I made my way to the international terminal, my overnight bag slung over my shoulder and my heart heavy with trepidation. I had barely slept the night before, my mind racing with thoughts of Bastian, Dr. Hathaway, and the mysterious emails that had brought us all together. As I stepped into Concourse A, I spotted Bastian almost immediately. He was leaning against a pillar, his signature leather jacket and tousled hair making him stand out from the crowd of bleary-eyed travelers. When he saw me approaching, he straightened up and flashed me a grin, his eyes sparkling with mischief.
Hey, gorgeous. Look who decided to show up after all. I was starting to think you'd stood me up, Rosie.
I fought back a smile. You know I hate it when you call me that, Ham, I said, falling into step beside him as we made our way to the platform. And I wouldn't have proposed this little adventure if I didn't think it was important. So, let's skip the banter and get down to business, shall we? Bastian chuckled, but I could see a flicker of something else in his eyes, something like hurt or regret.
All right, man, all right,
he said, holding up his hands in mock surrender.
No need to get all serious on me. I'm just trying to lighten the mood a little, that's all.
We boarded the plane in silence, settling into our seats just before the engines rumbled to life. As the clouds began to roll by outside the window, I pulled out my laptop and opened up the email I had received, the one that had started this whole crazy journey. So, I said, turning to Bastian, what do you make of all this? The emails, the mysterious instructions, the fact that we both received different pieces of the puzzle? Bastian leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration.
I don't know, but I don't like it. It feels like someone is playing games with us, trying to manipulate us into doing their bidding.
I nodded, feeling a chill run down my spine. I agree, I said. But the question is, who and why? What do they want with the Voynich Manuscript and with Dr. Hathaway? We spent the next few hours poring over the emails, comparing notes, and trying to piece together the clues. But the more we talked, the more questions we seemed to have. Who was behind the emails? What was the significance of the strange illustrations in the manuscript? And why had Dr. Hathaway disappeared? As the plane wound its way through the Atlantic Ocean, the sun dipping low on the horizon, I found myself stealing glances at Bastian, watching the way the golden light played across his classical Hellenic features. Despite everything that had happened between us, I couldn't deny the magnetism that still existed between us, the crackle of electricity that seemed to fill the air whenever we were together. But betrayal is a poison that lingers long after the wound has healed, and I couldn't forget the pain he had caused me, the way he had abused my trust and shattered my heart. And so I forced myself to look away, to focus on the task at hand and the mystery that lay ahead. We arrived at our destination late afternoon, a small remote village nestled in the hills of Tuscany. Following the cryptic instructions in our emails, we made our way to the outskirts of town, to a decrepit, seemingly abandoned church that loomed like a shadow against the bright sky. Bastian and I exchanged a wary glance as we approached the heavy wooden doors, our footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. But as we pushed them open and stepped inside, we both froze in shock at the sight that greeted us. The interior of the church had been transformed into a kind of makeshift laboratory, with ancient texts and artifacts scattered across every surface. In the center of the room stood a massive oak table, upon which lay a beautifully illuminated facsimile of the Voynich Manuscript, its pages glowing softly in the candlelight. But it was the figure hunched over the manuscript that made my heart stop in my chest. As they looked up at us, their face obscured by a heavy hood, I realized with a jolt of recognition that it was none other than Dr. Emily Hathaway herself. For a moment, we all just stared at each other, the air thick with tension and unspoken questions. Then, slowly, Dr. Hathaway lowered her hood and stepped forward, her eyes glittering with a strange, feverish intensity.
Amalia Rose and Bastian Ham. I've been expecting you.
Bastian and I glanced at each other, our expressions mirroring the confusion and apprehension we both felt. Dr. Hathaway, what is all this? What are you doing here? Dr. Hathaway smiled, a slight enigmatic curve on her lips.
I'm doing what I've always done. Seeking the truth. And the truth, my dear Amalia, is more incredible than you could ever imagine.
She gestured to the manuscript on the table, her fingers hovering reverently over the copies of ancient pages, now heavily annotated with fresh ink.
This manuscript is more than just a historical curiosity. It's a key. The key to unlocking the secrets of a lost civilization, a civilization that held women in the highest regard, that valued wisdom and knowledge above all else.
Bastian stepped forward, his eyes narrowed in skepticism.
And you expect us to believe that you alone have managed to decipher this manuscript after centuries of the greatest minds in the world trying and failing?
Dr. Hathaway's smile widened and she shook her head.
Not all of it, and not alone, no. But with the help of a powerful ally in artificial intelligence that my family has been developing for decades, an AI that has the ability to see patterns and connections that the human mind could never perceive.
She turned to me, her gaze piercing and intense.
That's why I sent you those emails, Amalia. Because I needed someone with your skills, your dedication to the truth, to help me bring this knowledge to the world. And Bastian.
She glanced at him, her expression softening slightly.
You have a role to play, one that will be revealed at the right time.
Dr. Hathaway paused, her eyes darting nervously to the shadows that gathered in the corners of the room.
I fear I may have already said too much. They are watching me, always watching as they used to watch my great-grandmother. I cannot stay in one place for too long, or they will find me.
Great-grandmother?
Bastian asked, a hint of confusion present in his gaze. She turned back to us, her eyes fierce and imploring.
You must understand, the knowledge I possess is dangerous. It pushed my great-grandfather into a serious depression for a while. There are those who would stop at nothing to contain it. I have taken great risks to bring you here, but I cannot linger.
I leaned in, my journalistic instincts demanding more evidence. Listen, even if this ancient text is indeed decoded, how do you prove the authenticity of its tales? I'm sure, in a few millennia, some historian will read Harry Potter fan fiction and go on an expedition trying to find the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry.
We have proved it using technology, archaeology, astronomy, and the scientific method. I have dedicated my life to this research, Ms. Rose. I wouldn't have contacted you if I wanted to peddle a hoax.
I mean, you also called him, I said, tilting my head in Bastian's direction.
Ouch, Rosie, you wound me.
Bastian clutched his heart dramatically. An impish grin tugged at the corners of his mouth.
Ease up on the barbs, will you?
Dr. Hathaway turned to me, her gaze steady and challenging.
Ms. Rose, do what you do best and try to debunk my findings. And when you fail, come and celebrate with me and the women who hold up half the sky.
I felt a rush of emotion, fear, excitement, disbelief, all swirling together in my chest. Could it really be true? Could Dr. Hathaway have actually unlocked the secrets of the Voynich Manuscript? Secrets that had eluded humanity for centuries? But before I could voice my doubts, a sudden commotion erupted from outside the church. The sound of shouting voices and pounding footsteps grew louder, and Dr. Hathaway's face paled with fear.
They found us. The ones who seek to steal my annotated copy of the manuscript, to use its knowledge for their own gain. We must go, now.
Bastian and I exchanged a brief, knowing glance before springing into action. I snatched the manuscript from the table, its pages crackling softly beneath my fingers, as Bastian kicked over a nearby candelabra, plunging the room into darkness. Dr. Hathaway's silhouette darted through the shadows, leading us to a hidden door that seemed to materialize out of the stone wall. The cool night air hit us like a shock as we burst out of the church, the sudden change in temperature sending a shiver down my spine. Behind us, the sound of splintering wood and angry shouts told us that our pursuers had discovered our escape route. My heart leapt into my throat as the first gunshot rang out, the sound as loud as a thunderclap in the quiet of the night. We ran blindly, our feet pounding against the uneven cobblestones, each breath tearing at our lungs like shards of glass. The narrow streets of the village twisted and turned like a maze, the looming buildings on either side seeming to close in on us as we fled. The sharp crack of gunfire continued to echo behind us, each shot sending a fresh jolt of adrenaline surging through our veins.
This way!
Bastian grabbed my hand, his fingers warm and strong against my clammy skin, and pulled me into a narrow alleyway. Dr. Hathaway followed us, and we pressed ourselves against the rough stone wall, hardly daring to breathe as the sound of footsteps and shouted orders grew louder. For a moment, I was certain that they would find us, that our desperate bid for freedom had been in vain. But then, as quickly as they had appeared, the sounds began to recede, our pursuers moving off in the wrong direction. We waited, hearts hammering, until the last echoes of their presence had faded into the night. Only then did we allow ourselves to move, slipping through the shadows like ghosts until the village was far behind us. We ran for hours, the adrenaline slowly draining from our bodies, leaving us exhausted and trembling. The first light of dawn was just beginning to paint the sky in delicate shades of pink and gold when we finally stumbled into a secluded olive grove. The gnarled trunks of the ancient trees seemed to welcome us, offering shelter and concealment from prying eyes. I sank to the ground, my legs no longer able to support me, and leaned my head back against the rough bark of a tree. Beside me, Bastian was a silent presence, his face unreadable in the half-light. Around us, the world was slowly coming awake, the first birdsongs mingling with the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. Dr. Hathaway turned to us, her face drawn and her eyes haunted.
You must understand. The knowledge contained within the Voynich Manuscript is powerful, more powerful than you can imagine.
She pressed the manuscript into my hands, her fingers cold and trembling.
I'm entrusting all my findings to you now. You must scrutinize my work. Uncover the truth behind the lost civilization, behind the secrets that have been hidden for so long. And above all, you must share it with the world at the right time. Not before. My life is at risk and I need to vanish for a while.
She sprinted toward an old stone cottage.
Trust no one and don't search for me. I'll find you when the time comes.
I nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility settling onto my shoulders. Beside me, Bastian's jaw was set in determination, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the challenge ahead. As we watched Dr. Hathaway disappear into the mist, her figure fading like a ghost into the morning light, I knew that this was only the beginning. And so, as the sun rose over the Italian hills and the world began to awaken, we set out on our journey. We didn't know what lay ahead, what dangers and revelations awaited us. But one thing was certain. In the pursuit of truth, there are no shortcuts, only long roads and dark alleys,